So I want to do a video of a few examples from section 6.1 that are similar to your homework problems and make sure that you understand, because I don't know that I really did anything like this on the actual video. So I thought I'd do a few more. So on number 17, so what we're being asked to do is to find f of g. So remember, this is not fog. F of g of x and g of f of x if they exist. So sometimes they won't, and then we're going to state the domain and range for each composed function. So the alternate way of writing f of g of x, remember, is to write it like this. So you can write either way. So when you are writing out this, and when they give them to you not as equations but as ordered pairs, you want to start with g. Whatever you want to start with, the inside function, or the one that's the farthest to the right is the inside function. So I'm going to start with this 4. Notice that 4 goes to negative 4. So then I have to look in my function for f. I have to look up here and see, is there a negative 4? It has to be in the domain. So that's what I'm looking for. There's no negative 4, no, no, no. So this one isn't going to go anywhere for f of g. So then I look at my negative 2. Negative 2 goes to negative 1. So I look in my domain of f to see if there's a negative 1. There's not. So that's a dud. So then I look at negative 4 goes to 0. So I look up here in my function f, and here's a 0. I'm looking for a 0. I see a 0. 0 goes to 4. So I take this starting value, which was a negative 4, and this ending value, which was a 4. And that goes in my set f of g. Then I have to test the last one. 6 goes to negative 5. But if you look in the domain values, there's no negative 5. So that's it. So when they ask for my domain and range, the domain, I'm just going to use a D for domain, is negative 4. And the range is 4. And that's it. So now let's do g of f. This time I'm starting with f. So I'm starting with a negative 8. Negative 8 goes to negative 4. So I look down here for a negative 4, and there is one this time. Negative 4 goes to 0. So I started with a negative 8, ended at a 0, and I write down negative 8, 0. Then I go to the 0, because we're on f here. So 0 goes to 4. So I'm looking down here for a 4, and here's 1. 4 goes to negative 4. So I started with a 0, ended in a negative 4. So that goes in my set. Next, I'm going to go to the 2. So 2 goes to 6. So I'm looking down here for a 6, and I have one. 6 goes to negative 5. So I started with a 2, ended with a negative 5. And then the last one, negative 6 goes to a negative 2. And I have a negative 2 here. It goes to negative 1. So I started with a negative 6, ended with a negative 1. And that's all the points, so there can't be any more. My domain, all the x values, so we have negative 8, 0, 2, and negative 6. My range, the y values, 0, negative 4, negative 5, and negative 1. So I tried to go over that slow enough. It helps with different colors. If you need to watch that over again, then do. So here, let's go back, same instruction. So let's start with f of g and see what we can come up with. So remember, I start with g, because that would be considered the inside function. If I wrote it in this way, it's easier to see that. So negative 8 goes to 2. There's no 2. Negative 4 goes to 1. There's no 1. Remember, the 1 has to be in the domain value. 3 goes to negative 3. So I'm looking at the x values here. There's no negative 3. 5 goes to 7. So I'm looking for a 7 here, and there isn't one. So this is actually the empty set. you can actually draw an empty set, or you can, sometimes you'll see it like this with the null or empty set. So now let's do g of f. So I'm going to start with f. 5 goes to 13, but there's no 13. Negative 4 goes to negative 2, so I'm looking at the x values. There's no negative 2. Negative 8 goes to negative 11, but there's no negative 11. 3 goes to 1, but there's no 1. So we, once again, have the empty set. All right, problem 29. Oops, I didn't write down the directions. It says to find f of g of x and g of f of x if they exist. State the domain and range for each composed function. So we're going to find, I'm going to write it in this notation, f of g of x. The textbook used the f of g of x like this, but you're welcome to switch it to this way. I like it because it tells me I'm putting g of x inside of f of x. So in place of the x that's here, I'm going to replace that with 3x minus 7. And then I still have the plus 5. So it's like I'm dropping this where the x is, and I'm replacing it with the 3x minus 7. And then you just combine like terms, so I get 3x, negative 7 plus 5 is a minus 2. So that's f of g of x. Now I need to find g of f of x. So for that one, I'm going to take f of x and drop it into g of x where the x is. So I still have a 3 times, in place of the x, I put x plus 5, and then I still have a minus 7. So I'm going to distribute the 3. I get 3x plus 15 minus 7, so it's 3x plus 8. And those would be my two answers for f of g of x and g of f of x. On number 31, we're going to start by doing f of g of x. So that means I'm going to take g of x and drop it inside. Now, I got to put it in two places because there's an x here and there's an x here. So I'm going to have x minus 6 squared, don't forget to square it, plus 6 times x minus 6 minus 2. So that's a little tricky. You got to drop the x minus 6 into both spots. Now, be careful here. Do not kill a puppy. You can put it in a box or foil it when you do that. So if you need to stop and think about this, x minus 6, you could do it that way. You'll get x squared minus, you'll end up with a total of 12x plus 36. Distribute the 6 right here, and you get 6x minus 36 and a minus 2. And then you combine like terms. So I only have 1x squared. Minus 12x plus 6x is minus 6x. And a plus 36 minus 36, those are gone, minus 2. And that's my answer. One of them. Now I have to get g of f of x. Now the good news is it's going to be easier because I'm taking f of x, which is this whole thing, and dropping it in here. So instead of an x, I have x squared plus 6x minus 2. Sorry, you'll see I like to use parentheses when I drop it in. And then I have a minus 6. All I have to do is combine like terms. I get x squared plus 6x. Negative 2 minus 6 is minus 8. And that's my answer. So that one of the directions was hard. The other one, not so bad. And then the last set of examples I want to go over, and these are actually the easiest, but sometimes students have trouble with them. So I want to make sure I go over this with you. I have three functions, f of x, g of x, and h of x. And we're just asked to find a value. So here I'm asked to find f of g of negative 2. So start with the inside function. So you're going to start with this part here and find g of negative 2. So I plug in a negative 2 in place of the x, oops, I guess it would help if I put a -2, plus 1. So -2 times -2 is +4 plus 1 is 5. So this whole thing here becomes a 5. And now I have to evaluate f of 5. So I plug a 5 in here. I get 5 times 5 is 25. And this is my answer to the problem. So it's a two-step part. You're just going to plug it into the inside function first, get your answer, take that answer, plug it into the outside function. So on the next problem, I'm starting with f of -5, the inside function. When I do that, I get 5 times -5, which is -25. And now I have to take that answer and plug it into h. So I get h of -25. So I'm going to have -25 squared. Don't forget parentheses. Remember, we've seen that before. Times 6 times -25 plus 8. And you can grab your calculator. Make sure you put parentheses around it if you square a negative. You should get 483. I punched it into my calculator, assuming I did it right. I think I did. So we get 483 for our answer to that problem. Now, it's not one of these problems, but you could even do f of g of h of 1. So think about what that might look like. You always start with the inside function. So you would start here, and you would find h of 1. So if I do h of 1, I get 1 squared plus 6 times 1 plus 8, which is 15. And then I'd take that answer and plug it inside of g. So I would do g of 15, -2 times 15 plus 1. So -30 plus 1 is -29. And then I would go to function f, and I would plug it in there. So I would get 5 times -29, and I would get -145. And that would be my final answer. So it's not that hard. You just got to start with the inside function and work your way out. So that should help you with some of your problems you're doing today.